So we're in the house of Tom and Nancy Byrne, who've kindly consented to have a chat about their life and times. So maybe Nancy, do you want to tell us anything about kick off whenever?
Well, I'm not a native around here now. I was from Rathmalline, from a place called Rathmalline.
Well, that's a terrible distance away.
Oh yeah. Still, you know, at that time it was a long distance because there was no cars or anything. You had to go on a bicycle or walk. And I grew up with, I had one brother and one sister. My sister was much younger than I was. So, you know, she wasn't, I was gone out of the house before she, you know, grew up. And we had no electricity until 1954, so it was very quiet life. We had no car until well after that as well.
What was your family name, Nancy?
My name was Brady, Nancy Brady. And I cycled we walked to the national school, which was Kill School, and it's replaced now with a new school. The old school is gone. It has been sold. It was sold there recently. I don't know what they're doing with it. But we had to walk, and there was no electricity at all, and no heating in the school. And we used to have it in turns to bring sticks to the school. You had to go out and gather those sticks in the evening time after school and bring them the next morning on your bag, as well as your school bag. And that's the way it went like that until we started then in the secondary school. And that was to St. It was St. Mary's Convent at that time, but I think it is replaced now by School Mirror. And we cycled there 5 miles. Morning and back in the evening time, and for 5 years. And then I went nursing to Jervis Street Hospital after that in 1956.
Could we maybe bring Tom in with the earlier part of your life, Tom?
Yeah, that was much the same, only it was even...
And you were a native of?
I'm a native of here. I was born here and was a native of here. All my life, never lived anywhere else, you know.
And perhaps your parents before that, were they?
Well,
your parents before that?
yes.
They were here also?
They were living here too, yeah. William and Julia Byrne. She was Julia Downey before she married, and he was Willie Byrne. And I went on to Kiltale National School from here when it came to school going times. And you know, when I think back now and I look at the school buses going by and all, we walked from here down to Kiltale, mainly across fields and estates. It was McDermott Estate was one of the places.
Right.
And I always remember this man would buy a lot of cattle down in the west of Ireland, and he'd bring them up and they'd be just let out in about 2 miles from here. And then there'd be 2 more miles before you get onto another road. You know, and I remember it well, you know, there'd be no...
So you had about 4 miles to walk to school, had you?
Oh, would be what was counted over 3 Irish miles that time, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember he coming up one time. You see, we wouldn't know what was going on or anything in the field or that, but there was this grey bullock, and you had to just mind him. And if you saw the cattle at any area that you did a surround somewhere around, maybe, you know, into another field or something, or he just ran after you and that was it, you know. And if it was a really wet morning or that, you'd walk round the road, which was a colossal distance altogether that time.
And the school itself then?
The school itself was Kiltale National School. And
how did you find the teachers at that time?
The teachers, well, there was a little bit of an upset with the teachers there that time. The principal teacher kind of left the school or something. He got married and the marriage didn't go and that, you know, and he left the school altogether then.
But you've pleasant memories from your school days, have you?
Well, I wouldn't like to say anything about that man now, you know, because I don't know anything about where the people are or anything, you know, like that. But we went on. One of our biggest enemies was a man called Matt Murray. You'd be coming home and you'd be going whichever way it was, and you listened and you could hear this man screaming in the wind, you know, his voice coming in the wind, and he was definitely, you know, insane now. And like you just wonder what had happened today if he was about, you know. But apart from that, the teaching was normal, you know.
What about school pals? People at that time?
School pals, all my school pals now are gone on to their rest. Now the best of them.
But you've some special memories from that time, have you?
I would, yeah. I remembered. Boys that time. There wasn't any as such football or hurling. You know, you brought a hurling stick with you or a big lump of a stick of some sort, and we played with that during the lunch hour and that sort of thing. We played a bit of hurling with them big old sticks and that. But that took up a lot of your time, was taken up. Like just trying to do something during lunch hour and that.
Sure. Your memories of that time in Kill?
Well, we had a very pleasant time at school. It was a man and his wife, and they were very pleasant. They had two sons themselves, and one was a priest, Father Lenny. And we used to be delighted when we see Father Lenny coming, because he'd say to the mother, "Oh, let them home, have enough done for today." And you just went home, you know, there was no remarks passed. And the man was very nice, Mr. Morton was his name. And he actually died just as I was leaving the school. He took an illness, and we didn't know what it was at the time, you know, the way you wouldn't know. And the residence was just across the path from the school, and he was ill over there for quite some time, and his sister took over teaching us. And he died then just as I was leaving. 1951, I think I left, 52. And the mother then was teaching. She was upstairs, there was only two classrooms, upstairs and downstairs. And Mrs. Morton was upstairs and the man was downstairs, the master.
Right.
And no, it was very pleasant now, I'd have to say.
And any vivid memories of school pals?
No, we had very good school pals. We always met on just very near the house, and we all walked to school together.
Ah.
And there was no cars, there was absolutely no dangers at all. We used to cross fields and get to school the best way you could.
Yeah.
And we'd go in, there was a forge on the way, and we used to go in there on a very cold and frosty morning, and you'd go in and the man would let you warm your hands, and he'd be there shoeing horses.
Oh God.
Yeah, it was very good, yeah.
Incredible.
And then we used to go up to our house when the apple season would come, and they'd always have apples for us.
Mm.
Yeah. So it was very pleasant. We had very pleasant days in the primary school. It was the national school that time it was called, it wasn't primary school.
Yeah, sure. And let's say Christmas, for example, have you special memories of Christmas?
Yeah, you have pleasant memories, very pleasant memories of Christmas too, Tom.
Any particular
very quiet.
Any particular thing about the preparations or the excitement?
There was no. Well, again, as I tell you, we had no electricity.
Yeah.
Like I was almost leaving the house altogether by the time electricity came in 1954, and there was no such thing as putting up decorations or that. You put up holly and ivy. That was one big decoration. You go out in the fields and get the holly and the ivy. And that's my memory of it now. You know, there'd be very few Christmas cards or anything. I don't think there was Christmas cards that time. I have no memory now of Christmas cards or sending them at that stage. And you'd always put up a crib. There was always little figures for putting up a crib and that.
And was Santa Claus a big thing at that time?
Santa was a big thing at that time, yeah. But you'd only get very small things.
Yeah, but really looking forward to it.
But you'd be looking forward to
and
it.
excited with what you got.
You'd be awake at all hours in the morning. And I remember then my mother used to make the plum pudding, and we'd always cut it Christmas Eve for the Santa.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
What about yourself, Tom? Christmas and...
More or less the same, you know, thing now.
And it was a big ordeal, the pudding at Christmas, because you see you had to boil this big pudding, and they used to boil it that time in a cloth.
Yeah.
And I remember helping at it, you know, mixing it and that in a big crock.
Yeah.
And then we'd take it down. It used to be hanging up to dry out, you see.
All right. After it comes out of the pot.
After the pudding, and we'd cut it then Christmas Eve for Santa.
And that'd be a ceremony in its own right.
It would be a
something
ceremony,
special.
Yeah.
And you have exactly the same memories, Tom?
Yeah, more or less the same, yeah.
We used to have turkeys then and geese for Christmas, you know.
Right.
My mother used to rear geese and turkeys.
Right. But were you farmers as such?
Yeah, we were farming, yeah. My father was farming.
Right. Right. So very similar backgrounds, both of you.
Yeah, more or less.
And anything that stands out in your mind, Tom, about Christmas? Any Christmas when you were a child?
Well, no, it would be more or less the same as what Nancy said there, you know. You passed, you know, there was no such thing. Christmas wouldn't be talked about at this time, a month beforehand, or, you know, it'd be the week before Christmas.
When you'd get off school type of thing.
Get off school, and the men might go and have a few drinks some night and that sort of thing, you know. And it was different altogether from this is sort of a commercial thing now.
Of course.
You start Christmas as soon as you could.
Yeah.
You know.
But from a child's point of view, there was huge excitement.
Yeah.
Just Christmas Eve and Christmas Day was very important.
Just, the more or less the same now. What Nancy said, there'd be a pudding made and that sort of thing, you know. And we look forward to too.
Of course.
You know.
And I'm sure it would have been a day of rest. Your dad and mum would be in probably. There wouldn't be another day like it in the year where they'd take the time off.
Well, when you were on a farm or got to do with a farm, the Sabbath didn't count.
There was no day of rest.
No, because you had to feed stock and everything. Just the same.
Yeah, every day.
Yeah.
And moving on, you mentioned about the convent. How did you find your time there?
Yeah, I haven't very, vivid memories of anything happening excitable in it now. That
Wasn't meant.
No, it wasn't meant to. You struggled to get there in the morning time, especially in bad weather. I remember one time on the 8th of December we were flooded on the road in and we couldn't get to it.
Oh my God.
You had to turn back down at Larracourt.
Right.
There was a river across there, and that road is closed now when you go out on the new patch.
Right.
But you know where the old patch is there still?
Yeah.
Well, you turned left there, and there was a river there, and it was all across the road and in the man's garden, Morgan's garden.
Ah, yes.
And you had to come back.
Aye. Wow. That was an acceptable reason for missing school.
Yeah. But apart from that, you come home in the evening time, and by the time you got the dinner, and it was back to studying again for the next day, getting ready for the next day.
And you got quite a lot of study, quite a lot of homework.
You got a lot of homework.
Right, right. Studying later on, but you could have done without it at the time.
You had to get on with it,
yeah. And what about your experience, Tom, after you left primary school?
No, well, my father died when I was very young at the time. There was an elderly uncle lived here, and he took over the kind of, it's him you'd go to and ask what was to happen with such and such a thing and that. But I had very little time for any further education, only work at home here.
Of course.
You
That
know.
was pretty
Yeah.
much normal at the time.
Well, it
was
was
quite
yeah.
commonplace.
Well, quite a number of lads went on to an agricultural college for a while and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But when you were left in the situation I was in, was you got up in the morning there and you fed your 2 horses and come in and have your breakfast and bring them for a drink down to the stream and come back up and yoke them and go out in the field and start ploughing.
Right.
And you stood at that till the dark put in the night,
Wow.
you know.
Okay.
There was 2 days highlighting, it used to be the highlight of the year. One was the fair in Rathmalane on the 19th of April. And there was a day off from school for that. And that was the only day that I remember that you get sweets. A fella used to come called Danny McGovern to the fair with this big truck. And he'd have what was known as Peggy leg, or Peggy's leg. And that was the only one that you'd be looking forward and waiting for this fella to come all day. And you wouldn't see another sweet for the year.
Really?
No,
Yeah.
there was no such thing as sweets. That I don't remember them anyway.
Right.
You see, they were the war years, and then I remember the first orange, and we didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And bananas as
And
well.
bananas, yeah. There was nothing like that at all.
Hmm.
You had to use, yeah, we had gooseberries and apples and black currants and that kind of thing
Right.
growing in the garden.
Sure.
But apart from that, I don't remember now. I remember getting the first orange.
Hmm.
I didn't know what it was.
Where did you shop?
We shopped in Rathmalane in the beginning, like until I started going to school, and then I'd bring home things. And then we had a horse and trap. And my father would yoke this horse and trap and go to the shop. It was a big day out to trim once a fortnight or whatever it was. And the park in Spicer's yard and trim.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I remember that well.
Any
And
memories
go
like
on
that?
the horse and trap to mass. Always.
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
And how many?
Sunday.
The whole family, yeah.
The whole family, and you bring round the horse and trap. There was round at the back of the church. There was a place for tying the horse.
Ah,
And
right.
yeah.
God, that was a memory, I'm sure,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
Yeah.
And something similar for you
Same
too?
the same, yeah.
Mm.
Where Nancy is talking about now, in Kiltale, there was a place, I suppose you'd tie 6 horses, pony and traps, like, you come in like that, there was a ring in the wall in front of you and you tie your horse there. The next fella parked in much the same way. And these horses, sometimes they become terrible contrarian, they'll be fighting with one another or
You
trying
bring a
to
little
fight.
bag of hay with you
What?
for them.
Sometimes you bring a bag of hay and that'll be used for your try and keep your feet warm while you be travelling. You see,
In the trap?
they put it in the well of the
And
trap.
you'd have a rug or a blanket
Yeah.
over you as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you went so that way on. Now when they started that wasn't built as a horse place for parking your horses and traps. It was built for the stonemasons. There was working on building the church at the time. There was no church there in Kiltale where it is now. And there were a horse and cart here drawing these stones down to it. And I remember an uncle of mine telling me that he went off for his load of stones. Now where they were got, I just don't know, but they were within horse distance. Anyway, it was a horse and cart brought them. And this man was chopping and chopping and chopping. And he was 3 days at it for the door lintel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That thing over the door. And towards the end of the 3rd day, Johnny was my uncle's name. He arrived with a sort of stones, and this fellow was still at it. And he gave one last little chip like that, and the whole thing
Ruined it.
And Johnny, what he said to me, the patience of these men, he just got the 2 halves like that, and he slung them over and got
Started
another big
again.
stone and started
Oh my God.
again. Yeah. It was interesting to hear that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I was telling, in fact, there was a fella below one day morning, and he putting up a lightning conductor on the church. He was above on the roof of it, and he could move. He had something like that in his hand, and he could move the thing below where he wanted to put on this extra couple of little pegs along. And I was telling him when he got down the trouble the lads had long ago at it, and he was really interested in it now.
And was there more than one stonemason at that time, or just?
There was
Right.
several other fellas.
Right.
This would be the prize man that had been doing these complicated things.
The tasty bits, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of detail. That's not the present church, is it?
It is the present church.
Okay.
They were building it at the time.
Yeah, right. Wow.
I wouldn't remember now the year it was built, but it's in the hall of
It
the
was
church.
100
still.
years there in, what year was that? Father Mulvaney was here at the time.
Yeah, that's 20 years ago, I suppose.
Oh, no, so
Or,
no,
yeah.
I don't think so. About 15 maybe.
What, Tom, would be the first piece of machinery that had an engine in it that came around the place?
Yeah, well, the first I got was an old Massey, an old Ferguson tractor. Massey wasn't in it at the time, and it was the first tractor like I saw with a hydraulic lift on it. And
What year would that be roughly?
roughly now I wouldn't be able to tell you, but it'd be 14, I suppose. 10 from 90 would be 80. It'd be around about 1978 or around that, I suppose.
Right.
It might be a bit earlier than that, because I think there was...
Oh, but you had a tractor when I came here in 1964.
Would be. Oh, indeed, we had demonstrated that man I was telling you about the other day, Pat Farley, his father, had gave them a little field below to advertise these. And Miss Knowles, I remember well, was the lady. This was supposed to be, you see, that a woman could go out and plough with this. You pull a little lever there and the plough came out of the ground and all. And she was done up in riding outfits, and all that. And she down along, but she didn't go too straight anyway. And I remember this Pat Farley's father shouting at her. He said, you should have stood to the old scrum. He said, that she'd have got it straighter. But that was...
And before that, horses were used for everything, were they?
Horses were used. In my young days, it was horses, swath turners for turning the hay. And I suppose the mowing machine was a big thing that time,
And what type of mower was it? Was it a rotary mower or a finger blade? Or?
It was a finger blade.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The rotary mowers didn't come out for a long time. After that, you needed engine for them to revolve the thing quicker.
Right.
Yeah.
But implements of all kinds for horse-pulled implements to do every job.
They changed.
Dozens of different...
Yeah, now down the road here, there were big farmers called Sweeney's. And they bought the first swath turner that was known of, and Joe Ryan was the man in charge, and he was sent in with the horse to the railway station to bring home this swath turner. And the devil a bit he could put the horse to it anyway, and the roads were going round.
Yeah.
And he drove it home that way. He couldn't
disconnect it.
Out of gear,
Yeah. He'd learn. But your nursing time then, when you left the
Yeah,
school?
when I went to nursing then in Dublin in Jervis Street Hospital, now closed. And they were very pleasant years now I had in it. And it was much different, nursing that time and the hospital life was a lot different from what it is. It was smaller to start with. There was, I remember 124 beds or something to that now, but I was just trying to think there. I think it was 124 beds in the hospital altogether. There'd be nearly that on the floor here now.
Were there, yeah.
And the Sisters of Mercy run them. And there was a nun in charge of each ward. Now there was one big ward and there was 45 beds in it. And there'd be 42 then in the men's ward corresponding to it. And there'd be a nun in charge then, and there'd be only 2 nurses on night duty. And there'd be about 6 nurses in the daytime. But it was all very pleasant, like there was no such thing as a waiting list or anything like that. Like the doctor would ring up and look for a bed and he'd get the nun for them. And she'd say, yeah, we'll get someone out now that's ready to go home. And she could call a doctor and say, can we let such a one home, he's all right. And fit to go home and to take in another one.
Right.
And there was never a waiting list or there was no unions. We belonged to no union at all. And you just did what you were told. And you'd have 2 hours off. You went on, you were called at 6:30 in the morning time. And you were down to your breakfast at 7. And you'd be on the duty in the wards at 7:45. And the night nurses went off then. And you'd get a cup of tea at 10:30. And you'd get your dinner at 3. And you'd get 2 hours off in the daytime. And if you were on night duty, you'd get two nights off in the month. Yeah, you got home very seldom now. You wouldn't be coming home. Well, you wouldn't have any money anyway to come home on the bus. You had to stay in Dublin. And but it was very pleasant now, I have to say. But if they were very busy now in the evening time, when you'd maybe be off at 5 o'clock instead of at 7:15, the nun would just say, yeah, well, you can't go. And that's all, you just say, right. And you'd have to stay there if a bad accident or anything came in or somebody very ill, you'd have to stay with them. You'd be just told to stay there with them.
And was there nurses' quarters or had you dig somewhere?
Oh yeah, no, we had a nurses' home. It was just right across from the hospital. Beautiful nurses' home it was.
Yeah.
And Charisse was demolished too, like it was just all made bits of.
What sort of facilities were in the nurses' home?
Oh, there was nurses' home, there was everything in it. There was a lovely sitting room. If you had visitors, there was a sitting room on the right and on the left. And there was a place for washing your clothes. We used to call it the boot room. And you went down, there was no washing machines now. You washed by hand in the sink. And there was a place for hanging them up and all.
Right.
I was all indoor now. You hung up your clothes indoor. And it was all bathrooms. There was a bathroom on every floor and that.
Right.
Oh no, there was very good facilities now.
Right.
And you looked out in the morning time when, in first year, when you went there first, you were in dormitories. And you could look out at Todd Burden's clock in Henry Street or Roach's Stores and see what time it was at any time of the night or day. Yeah, it was always lit up.
And did you get to go out and have...
Oh yeah, you could go out every day. You could go out on your daytime off, 2 hours off in the daytime, you could go anywhere you liked out in the street and that. Yeah.
And recreation-wise, during your
we
years
used
there?
to go to Cleary's there was a wheelchair association and we joined that and you could go to the dances in Cleary's.
A wheelchair
A
association?
wheelchair association, yeah.
How did you qualify for that?
Well, all you had to do was apply, and if you went for the wheelchair association, you'd sell flags maybe, and you'd have to be sent out to the cattle mart maybe to sell flags or something for them.
Out to Hanlon's Corner?
Out to Hanlon's Corner, yeah, many is the day I stood in it.
Right, wow.
And selling flags. And you could go to Cleary's then and you get in free. Because you wouldn't have enough money to go otherwise. And all the recreation was very good. You had to be in by 10 o'clock. The dances would start at 8 and you had to be in by 10 and you wouldn't get in, you'd be sent home.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was probably a difference between, let's say, a hospital in the city as you were and perhaps one, you know.
Oh yeah, we were in the heart of the city. Like, you could go to the Metropole. Was another place we used to go to on a Saturday night, but it'd be only once maybe in the year that you go to the Metropole.
Yeah.
Because you had to get special leave to go.
Right.
And if the matron said no, you can't go, that was it. and then the matron, we used to run dances in the hospital. She gave us permission to run dances in the hospital, but you had to get a charge in, and the money went towards the maintenance in the nursing home, or the nurses' home.
And would there be lads at the dance?
Oh yeah, you could invite in anyone you liked.
Right.
I remember one night, I don't know how they got there, but 2 boys from Trim came.
Right.
Pat Leonard was one of them, down the Mercy on him,
Really?
and Matt Daly. I don't know who invited them or where they came from, but
They found their way up
they
anyway.
found their way there anyway, yeah.
What in your experience, how much has nursing changed, the actual profession of
they
nursing?
have changed completely. Yeah,
Right.
changed.
But not just the conditions, but the actual
The
job.
actual nursing, yeah, has changed completely.
Has it?
Yeah,
In
sure.
what way?
Well, we used to have to feed the patients to start with. We went on in the duty at the morning time at 7 o'clock, and or no, 7:45. And the first thing we did was make the beds and help people then bring out the breakfast. You had to go into there was a kitchen, and you had to go in and get your breakfast for each patient and bring it out. And anyone that couldn't eat, wasn't able to feed themselves, you fed them and cleaned them up again. And then you did the dressings. The senior nurses did the dressings, and the junior nurses tidied up the beds again and gathered up the trays. And you had to clean all the trays and leave them ready for the girl who was going to wash them in the kitchen. There was all these from the Magdalen laundry used to come in and help out. Yeah, there was a domestic quarters as well. They were resident in the hospital.
Right.
Oh yeah, it was very well run that time. It was totally different. And then you'd get anyone that was able to get up out of bed, you had to get them up. And anyone that wasn't, then you had to look after them in bed and give them drinks and everything like that, you know. It's totally different, because I remember now we had a son in Navan Hospital. I couldn't get over it, and he was after having an operation on his back, and I went in and his dinner was at the bottom of the bed at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and he crying with the hunger. He said, "Sure, how can I get it?" And on his face he said, "I can't get it."
And that leads me to, was the ratio between patient and nurse, was it far greater, is it far greater now, different than?
Well, no, there was only about, as I tell you, where I was now, there was 42 beds in the ward, and there'd be only about 4 nurses, and 2 in the night time.
And you had to do all that
Yeah,
work?
you had to do all that work.
So it's no different than it is now, really?
Oh, not at all, no.
So-
I used to wonder what they were doing in hospital. There were so many of them, you know.
That's strange, isn't
Oh,
it?
yeah.
So
yeah.
it was always...
Yeah, and another thing, like, you had to wash out sheets.
Oh my God.
And incontinent people, like anyone that would be incontinent, and you had to change them, you had to sluice them out and leave them ready for the laundry.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
There's no such thing.
So
There's nothing disposable at all.
No, you had a whole range of duties.
Yeah, you had to boil syringes. Everything had to be boiled
And reused, yeah.
and reused. You had to make dressings during visiting time. There was visiting 3 times a week maybe, from 2 to 3 or 3 to 4, whatever it was. And the nurses used to have to make dressings at that stage. There was a big table in the middle of the ward, and you just started making dressings, and you had to bring them down then and autoclave them, put them into an autoclaver
What's that?
to sterilise them.
Oh yes.
And they were just packed into a big autoclave.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was really hard work.
Oh, it was hard work. And then if somebody came in, a bad accident came in, and there was bones broken and that, you had to go up and get splints. And you used to have to climb up a big ladder to get them.
Oh my God.
Space was very, wasn't great in any of those hospitals at that time.
Sure. But
And it was a big room, and it was known as the splint room. And you went up and you had to get your splints or whatever you had to get, crutches, whatever you had to get for them.
Well, I'm not saying that the nurses of today are massively overworked and under great pressure, but it was no different in your day.
Oh,
It's-
no different, no.
Right.
We hadn't the time, you see.
And you didn't have a union, and you couldn't expect a rise.
No.
See, I
No
think
union.
the nurses, the present day nurses, I think, have their eye on the clock more so than on the patients. You know, it's
Sure.
when quitting time is, and that's it, down tools and go.
It's clearly very different than your day.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
different, yeah.
And as you say, if the matron wanted you to stay on, you stayed on.
You just stayed on, you didn't answer her back.
Yeah.
You might be getting the walking papers.
Even as a senior nurse.
Oh, even as a senior nurse, yeah.
Right. How long was your training?
In fact,
Sorry.
it was worse as a senior nurse because she said, you stay on there.
Yeah. You'd have more responsibility and
you
more
had
skills.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
How long was the training at that
The
time?
training was 3 years and you gave a year to the hospital then.
Right.
And if you were lucky enough, you'd be asked to stay on. And if not, you had to go and look for a job.
Yeah. In terms of preparing you for serious accidents and what you'd see, and were you ever in theatre?
Oh yeah, you got your chance to get to the theatre. You'd be in it for 3 months at a time.
And that
And you'd assist at operations
Right.
and that. But you wouldn't be the senior nurse now, you'd be looking on in the beginning. And you'd start off with, say, an appendix or something like that. You'd be able to hand the instruments to the surgeon.
for most people, including myself, that would be certainly the first time a difficult experience.
Oh yeah.
And how did you find it?
Well, I don't remember being any different, you know.
Because you hear about students fainting and all of
Yes,
this.
no, I don't think that, no, you never pass that.
So you really were a dedicated nurse. It's what you wanted to
You just
do.
wanted to do that,
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I said that.
You'd have to go down then and lay out people. There was no such thing as when somebody would die in the ward, they come in with the habit. It used to be a habit at that time. I never saw them dressed up now, like the way they are now. And you brought them down to the mortuary. And whoever was on duty at the time, you know, if you were responsible, if I was responsible, I went down with them. And the people would come in then with what was known that time as a habit. It was brown, or they used to have blue for a woman, Child Mary, you know, there'd be blue on them. And you lay them out on the slabs. And then when they'd be going out in the evening time, you'd have to go down and say the rosary.
Right.
Yeah, you got your chance
So
to do all that kind of thing.
Everything that had to be done,
Yeah.
all the chores,
Yeah.
every single thing,
Everything, yeah.
you had to do it.
Had to do it.
And not again being critical of the present day, but they would have ward assistants that have various people to do various jobs. Nurses wouldn't. They do nursing jobs today.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I don't think that all the
No.
other jobs you mentioned
Yeah.
would be done by other people.
Oh
I think.
yeah.
Not saying I'm sure they're very busy, but yeah.
Oh yeah.
But you had a huge range of work to
Oh,
do.
you had different kind of work to do, yeah.
Incredible stuff.
Yeah.
When did you become familiar with all of that, Tom? When did you both meet?
Oh, I did so tracking around the ward too. Yeah. I always remember, did you know old Tom Fields in Summerhill?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he was a patient in where Nancy was.
Oh.
And I remember he telling me this one now, and you can contradict it if you like, that this man had an operation, some kind of an operation, I don't know what it was anyway, and he started to hemorrhage in the middle of the night. And she came on and clamped it somewhere or another and got to stop the blood. And Phil said he'd be dead in the morning. Only I remember he telling me that, you know.
So that's
If you remember that.
so you can attribute that to your long life. She's kept you alive.
But you had to do all those things, you know.
Of course.
Yeah.
And at what period
And then
did you
you
meet?
got your turn. I mean, you got your turn to be everywhere, you see. But you certainly got your turn to be in the accident department,
Right.
the outpatients department, especially in the night time now.
Right.
And you'd have to go down, and a lot of drunks used to come in, like you called them drunks at that time, on a Friday night. It was no different from today, you know, they'd be falling around the place. and you just put them in a couch and they'd lie down and go to sleep. And
How would they be injured?
some of them might be scraped and cut and that. Nothing very elaborate or anything. And you just dress them, clean them up and dress them up and put them in a couch for the night.
Okay.
And maybe then if there was rowdy fellas there, you just ring Store Street and tell them to come up for them.
And did you
Store
ever?
Street with the guards would come up.
Yeah.
And they'd say, what are you at? And quieten them down, and bring them maybe.
Mm.
And they'd know them well, they'd be able to call them by name.
Right.
But at a stage you'd know them too. You'd be able to call them by name and see them coming.
To be repeat offenders.
Yeah, to be repeat offenders, exactly. But then you get in bad cases, you could get in some...
Badly injured.
Yeah, very badly injured. A motor bicycle accident, I remember came in one night. The driver was dead and the pillion passenger was dead.
Yeah.
You get all that now, especially in Jervis Street, like at that time it was the place for all those kind of things coming in.
And you never, or did you ever have any trouble switching off from, when you leave and you go to your bed? Would any of this be still in your head, or?
Oh no, I don't
Shouldn't.
remember. Another thing now we used to have to do, but that was outlawed, I think, before I left it, was that there was a gate lodge coming into it, and everybody in the night time, if the big gates were closed at say 10 o'clock, and if an ambulance came, then they'd be hooting, and you'd have to open there used to be a night watchman there, and he'd go out and open the gate. But say somebody died during the night, the nurse used to have to go down and relieve him for he to come up and bring the trolley to get the corpse out of the ward. And the nurses used to have to go out and open the gate for the ambulance man and all.
Nothing you didn't have to do.
No, you didn't, yeah. And you didn't mind like going down at that time of the night or anything.
Yeah.
There was no drugs or anything.
Right. So that was a factor that you didn't have to deal
Oh
with.
no, you hadn't coped with drugs.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I never remember anyone. I don't remember drugs now.
There's reports now where nurses at the moment would be assaulted.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You
in
have-
wards even.
Yeah. You haven't had that.
No.
No.
There was nothing like that at all.
Right.
No, there was the height of respect for nurses, like at that time.
Mm.
We'd go out now and the slummiest part of, that was a very slummy area around Jervis Street that time. There was Red Cow Lane, I remember, various places. And you'd go out into the houses maybe with some old person and there'd be no remarks passed. You had the height of respect for you once you'd have the uniform on you. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Different times.
Oh, it was totally different, yeah.
But when did you meet?
We met
how did you meet?
A show and trim.
Oh.
Agricultural show and trim.
All right.
At a dance and trim.
Ah, of course. And where would that dance be held?
In the town hall.
In the town hall.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
That was the first of it, wasn't it?
I remember that now. The first time I saw Nancy was on Market Street in Trim. Herself and another girl were walking down the street, and I was going in with what we used to.
Jimmy Reynolds.
Yeah, what was that? Pink flower that I had big brambles of it now. And for the procession the following day was in Trim, you see, and I went into Tess Reynolds with this, and I saw these two walking on the street, and I said, I'd just like now to say hello to that girl again, So the opportunity cropped up, and that...
At the dance, is it?
No,
Before that?
but no, the dance wasn't that.
Right.
The dance was a bit later on. We went to it then.
Oh, I see. You did meet in Market Street
This
that
was the
day.
first time I saw her,
Oh, right. Okay. Right.
So there you were, no?
So it was a continuation from that point. There was,
Oh,
right. Okay.
just,
And you were both quite young then, were you?
Yeah, well I was anyway.
Yeah.
You were older than I was.
I was going near 40, wasn't I, that time?
30, in the late 30s.
Late 30s,
I
yeah.
was only in my 20s, 25.
Right.
There's what, about 14 years, I think. Yeah.
No, 30.
13 years between us.
So that was, and was there much time then between, you know, when you met first and when you got married? And
Well, my mother died in 1963, and we waited for another year then in 64. We were married in 64.
right. So lots of dances in the meantime, I presume, was there?
Well, there was the carnival. You weren't around for the carnival in Summerhill.
Oh, I was at it a
We
few
used to go
times.
to it.
Were you supposed to be?
Yeah.
Oh no, I didn't know about that time.
Right.
But I used to go to the carnival in Summerhill. Did you know the carnival? Remember the carnival?
I do. I mean, I do remember them, but I mean,
You'll be a lot younger.
well, I wouldn't be allowed in at the time, but I do remember. I mean, that just the tents alone and
Yeah.
all of that was an amazing,
Yeah.
experience. You know, for a kid, it's
Yeah.
just like a carnival coming to town. It was, you know, it's amazing.
Yeah. It was a very successful carnival every year.
Yeah, it ran. It was in support of the church
Yeah. Then it moved to Rathmaline. We used to have one in, well, it wasn't a carnival, it was called a fete in Rathmaline, F-E-T-E. And I can't remember, was it a week it used to go on for at a time, but there used to be that marquee dancing and all.
Right.
All these noted bands used to come at the time.
Right. How did you travel then? You know, going to Trim, let's say, to the dance. Would you both ride bicycles or?
Oh, you ride your bike.
Well, I don't remember riding a bicycle now to a dance. There was no such thing as going that time to a dance except in Dublin. You know, there was no dances before I went to Dublin.
But even to get into Market Street that day from your home?
Oh, by bicycle.
Bicycle.
Oh, yeah, bicycle everywhere. Yeah.
I remember now riding a few times up to Gilcock to a dance.
Yeah.
Don't know whether it was a carnival.
And you'd walk cattle along into Trim too. They used to hold a market on the street was it every Saturday?
Yeah,
Was it on a Saturday?
Terminated there.
In Market Street in Trim, and they'd hold the cattle there to sell them.
And roughly what year would the last of that?
Well,
When?
it was in the early 60s, I'd say.
Really?
No, they weren't selling them. It was the 50s.
Yeah.
50s.
I think it stopped around the 50s.
Yeah.
I think the last fair in Summerhill might have been 57, I think.
Yeah, well, it was around that time.
Yeah.
But you'd walk the cattle into Trim, you had to put it in with them.
You were never involved in that, or were you?
I was, yeah.
You were.
Yeah.
For your
But
for
you
your
had to
dad.
go in front of them and stand in gates to be open or whatever. Yeah.
And if you weren't lucky, you had another job to round them up.
Yeah, you had.
Yeah. Well, cattle were quieter that time. That's one thing I remember about them.